Liturgy of the Palms by Amy Brooks. After he had said this, he went on ahead, going up to Jerusalem. Luke 19:28. He was still picking his teeth clean from the meal with Zacchaeus when he told the tale of the Antichrist, the nobleman deeply disliked, who purchased his way into power, who bullied his servants into usury and slaughtered his opponents. He was still exhaling the words when he showed them by example what noble really means. The peasant leader, wildly loved, who borrowed his seat into the city, who asked his friends to follow freely on the way to meet his own death at the hands of his enemies. He was still within the chaos of the crowd when he wept for peace, still wiping the tears from his cheeks when he raged at the robbers. He was still emphatically the antithesis of empire, with every word and action until the very end. And still they ask the church not to get political.
The antithesis of empire, wiping his tears and raging at the robbers. Amy Brooks, whom many of you remember from Petoskey, has a way of bringing biblical references into the present day that inspires me. At this time of year, Christians and Jews both have holy seasons that honor significant events in their histories, worth exploring as you use in the good times and in these challenging times. For Jews, Passover began after sundown last night, and it ends next Sunday. It honors the exodus of the Hebrew people from Egypt, where they were held captive by Pharaoh. Moses tried to get the Pharaoh to free the people by using diplomacy, but by asking the Pharaoh to let the people go. But Pharaoh needed the free labor of these enslaved people. Well, Moses seemed to have a pretty special relationship with God and warned the Pharaoh that God would release plagues on the Egyptians if the people were not freed. There were 10 plagues, such as rivers turning to blood, frogs hopping everywhere, insects eating the crops, animals dying, skin disease, the sun blotted out. And the most important one, an angel of death would kill the firstborn child of all Egyptian families. Dude had some chops. Well, to protect the Hebrew children from this angel of death, Moses asked the Hebrew people to paint lamb's blood on their doorposts so the angel would pass over the house and the child would be spared. It marked the house as one to be left alone. Pharaoh didn't know about this sign, and his own son was killed by the angel of death. So out of desperation, he called Moses in for a meeting and told him to leave Egypt immediately and take his people with him. After the people were freed, it wasn't easy for them. Pharaoh didn't really want to let them go, and they had nowhere to go. They spent years, I guess it was 40 years, wandering in the desert, seeking a place to call home, a promised land, a place where they could practice their faith, earn from the fruits of their own labor, and avoid the cruelty of Pharaoh. Now, when they left, they had to give some things up. People grumbled and murmured because life was really hard out there. They were miserable under Pharaoh, but they were somewhat secure, maybe. I don't know much about the brutality they must have experienced, but they were certainly not free. This Exodus story has been an inspiration to people who have been held in slavery in this country too. Even though freedom is hard, having a sense of self-determination mattered. Going out of Egypt together mattered. Wading in the water to cross the Ohio River on the Underground Railroad mattered. I think about the courage it takes to leave a life behind and get on a path with others that leads to who knows where. Some promised land. Thank goodness people were willing to join together and move together. The choice to give up the familiar and move into the wilderness is inspiring to me. The outcomes are uncertain, and there may be consequences. It's not always unanimous. People give up and move in a different direction. People grumble or revolt. In this story, eventually, the Hebrew people get to the promised land. Moses is on Mount Nebo, and he can look out over the promised land, but he can't get there. Sound familiar? He dies there, and the promised land is intended for the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The fruits that come from their hardship, the journey, the loss and pain, those fruits were intended for future generations. And that is the nature of having a public life, a life invested in making a better world. Now, the story of Jesus' life and death parallels some of the work that Moses did. After all, Jesus was a Jew. He knew about Moses. He preached about Moses. He was a monotheist. The similarity in the story for me is in choosing to go with courage to oppose oppression and create change. In the Christian story, the time leading up to the holy holiday of Easter is Lent. Lent is a time of giving something up that honors the 40 days Jesus spent wandering in the wilderness, trying to find his purpose. Lent, in our present-day calendar, is a 5-week period of intentional sacrifice. You know, maybe we give up chocolate. While in the wilderness, the story goes, Jesus fasted quite a bit and was tempted by the devil. He resisted the temptation, and that time of introspection and self-reflection helped him understand that he had a purpose. I would call it a purpose to make the world a better place. Even though he was in the wilderness, when he returned to society, he started organizing. He found disciples to go with him, people choosing to take a difficult path against the powerful leaders of the era. He left the wilderness to begin a ministry that is admirable, welcoming strangers, working across tribal groups, healing the sick, feeding the hungry, calling out the moneylenders in a temple tantrum. All this organizing work gained him notoriety, and as Jesus and the disciples decide to go to Jerusalem, he rides in on a donkey triumphantly, greeted by adoring fans to a carpet laid with palm fronds. And of course, this does not make the government happy. How dare someone get so much attention? What is powerful about these stories is the sense of taking an ethical action in the face of the oppressor, be it Pharaoh or Caesar. And so they come out of the wilderness, choose a course of action, and gather with others. Our opening song by Peter, Paul, and Mary Greenwood is based on the Christian Bible, Luke 23:31. If we do these things in the greenwood, what will happen in the dry? It poetically shares the idea of the consequences of ignoring oppression when things are good in the greenwood. They performed it in 1968 at the Democratic National Convention. This was the height of the Vietnam War and political unrest. The people of privilege were barren of compassion, going along with things they knew were wrong when they weren't personally affected. It's the barrenness that comes when we have what we need, but ignore the needs of others. If the oppressor treats them this way when the times are good, it's easy for people of privilege to ignore it. But we need to consider what on earth they will do to us when times are hard. Then we can no longer ignore it. The lyric by Peter Yarrow is, "Will no one light the candle in the darkness? Will no one be my guide, not let me fall? I've lost the sense that tells me where the path is. I feel the chill of winter in my soul. There's no way I can say the words more plainly. There's no one left to point at anymore. It's you and me, and we must make the choice now and not destroy the life we're living for. If they treat you this way now, how will they treat me later?" Better to think about the consequences of inaction by acting now with people who are affected by injustice, acting all the time. Jesus's followers had another choice, didn't they? To go or not to go. As leaders, they suffered and caused pain and suffering for themselves and just by following Jesus. But eventually they did create great change. They were looking beyond themselves. They could see the consequences of inaction. Their actions mattered then, and they even matter now, for better or worse. These prophets, Moses and Jesus, envisioned something better for the world, and like so many you use today, believed they could change things for the better. Sometimes we have to survive the wilderness to find it. You usually find it in our creative relationships with one another. That space I call God or love, that creative space among us. It might come after some awakening that occurs in a period of introspection or reflection. But to make a difference, it must be with others, whether or not we are personally affected. And yes, we may have hardships in the work, but we don't walk alone. Sometimes we use can be just a little overly optimistic, onward and upward forever. Then we might end all sin and evil completely. We might not even believe in sin or evil. We might say to ourselves, perhaps with the right education, perhaps with the right message, perhaps with the right amount of care, we can move closer to heaven on earth, closer to the good society. And now that we're awake, done with the wilderness, it is time to make change. How will we make change in these hard times? It will be by working in the opposite direction from the current government, choosing a direction and going together, even if we don't know what will happen in the end. UU religious scholar, feminist, and activist Sharon Welch describes 3 waves of revolutionary politics in her chapter in the book People So Bold. She writes that the first wave was the forceful denunciation of forms of social injustice, slavery, the oppression of workers, and the secondary status of women. These oppressions were considered part of the natural order of things, so the push back against liberation was forceful and difficult. How dare you go against the natural order? The second wave of activism was the work of identity politics, resolute claims for the complex identities and full humanity of all groups, marginalized and exploited by systemic oppression. These groups were silenced through cultural imperialism and deprived of cultural respect, a cultural order of things. Such inequities included race, ethnicity, ability, LGBTQ+ identities, and religious or ethnic groups. How dare you go against the culture? Welch writes that the third category of revolutionary politics is pragmatic political activism. She argues that when we recognize injustice, it is imperative to include the voices and experiences of all, to work together to build just and creative institutions, a just institutional order. We need these voices more than ever today, and we certainly see pushback against institutions that promote justice and equity. That pragmatic activism comes after we have recognized the horrors of injustice. We can no longer ignore them ever again. Now we need to work together to create social arrangements, the institutions that are equitable, sustainable, and joyous. This pragmatism arises in the face of the evil around us and within us. It is a form of interdependence. Welch says the solutions to the evil in the world are complex and ambiguous and hard to achieve, but we remain committed to working for peace and justice, even as we admit that we do not know how to bring these things to a world of suffering shaped by the poisons of greed, ill will, and delusion. I want to say that this book was written in 2010. We UUs who hold privilege often fail to grasp the idea of evil. It seems to be out there somewhere, but not in us. But we all contain the power of good and evil within us, even within us UUs. In the Greenwood, UUs of privilege might not see the oppression. We don't experience it. It becomes all too easy to ignore it because things are good for us. The ideas we are hearing from the current administration are not new. These ideas have been growing and for far too long have received anemic pushback. But we're on it now. We're heading out of the wilderness in search of the promised land. Reverend Rebecca Parker, also from the book A People So Bold, wrote that evil is operating as fraud, pomp, and greed, manifests as large-scale systems that effectively disrespect and deny basic human needs, disrupt human longings for recognition and connection, exploit resources without replenishment, and maintain social order through treating human beings with violence. We must ask ourselves, how can it be stopped? How can human beings be liberated from their captivity to an evil social order? As we wander in the wilderness, in the dry, perhaps we can take comfort in the knowledge that our faith calls us on, that green shoots will arrive again, that the sun will come out even if we don't see it. May we take comfort in our UU history of justice work, the inspiring stories of Theodore Parker, the abolitionist, Joseph Jordan starting schools for Black children in the South where there were none, James Luther Adams horrified by what he saw in Nazi Germany and bringing a message of resistance home, Waitstill and Martha Sharp smuggling people out of Czechoslovakia in the 1930s. None of these people were perfect. They all made mistakes, but they made a choice to move and resist. They recognized the dry and courageously gathered others around them to create change. Rebecca Solnit's recent blog about the April 5th hands-off protests reveals just how amazing it can be when we join together. With over 1,200 protests on that day, it nearly doubled the size of the 2017 Women's March. People are showing their power, and it will matter. Solnit wrote, I talk a lot about hope. Hope is not optimism. Optimism says, everything will be fine. Hope says, we don't know what will happen, but if we show up, if we stand up, we can maybe seize the chances. Hope makes friends with uncertainty, takes it by the hand and guides it toward our desires. Hope grabs the possibilities. Hope recognizes the future is made in the present. It's made by what we do and don't do. She continues, I want to end with two of the most beautiful insurrectionary sentences I know on this beautiful spring day. Sentences drawn from nature. One goes, they tried to bury us, but they didn't know we were seeds. Seeds germinate underground and they send up their shoots in the springtime. The other sentence goes, they can cut down the flowers, but they can't stop the spring. Be seeds, be the spring, be the insurrection, be civil society, be what happens. My friends, we need to stay engaged in the green, and we sure as heck can't give up in the dry. It is in the dry that we must double our commitments to plant and water and fertilize the seeds of change. That is when we are needed more than ever. Amen. May it be so. May we make it so.